Welcome everyone to today's show. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today we're going to talk about the Divorce Rehab. It's a theme here. A couple weeks ago we had on Dr. Terry Real and the new rules of marriage. So today we're going to talk about what happens when it doesn't work out and what we need to address. But before we get to that, just a quick reminder, we are about to start our last free 30-day manifestation challenge. September 1st, 2020 is the last free manifestation challenge in that group. We do it 3 times a year in the inner circle as well. Go to jjflazanes.com/30day, that's 30DAY, to register. And please be sure to fill out all the questions when you get to asking for permission to get into the Facebook group. I do only let in people who have filled it all out and are also verified in the system. Again, that's jjflazanes.com/30day. Please check the show notes for all links. Today's show is with Wendy Sterling. She is a leading divorce recovery specialist and founder of the Divorce Rehab. Wendy helps divorced women go from I do to I did to I'm done and confidently create a roadmap they design for what's next. Prior to founding her company and program, Wendy established her 18-year career as a top-level advertising sales executive in the digital space at the world's most progressive social and lifestyle website brands, such as Who What Wear and Refinery 29. After learning of her own unexpected divorce, she realized her divorce was a gift and she was meant for more. She wanted to make a more profound impact in the world so other women would see their divorce as an empowering experience that happened for them and not to them. She's worked with countless women to transform their lives and create their next best chapter. Wendy is a graduate of UCLA and a certified professional coactive coach from the Coactive Training Institute. She is also certified by the International Coaches Federation and just launched her own podcast, The Divorce Women's Guide. Wendy is an author and ThetaHealer and has been featured on many podcasts. She lives in Los Angeles with her 2 boys and dog, Max. Welcome to the show, Wendy.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Perfect timing. A couple weeks ago, I had on Dr. Terry Real and marriage and divorce and rehabbing marriages and relationships seems to be a theme that people are really interested in now, I think, because of our current life situation. We've been forced to hang out with people who we live with longer. And the question now becomes, is this a place I should stay and fix or leave? So I love that your niche is the divorce rehab. And I want to start off by, I know we talked a little bit in the bio about your background, but let's tell the story about what happened with you that got you to this place.
Sure. So I believe that divorce can be an empowering experience that women go through to find their true identity and voice, to design a life that they truly love and can create from a place of confidence, because that is exactly what happened to me. And interestingly enough, this week is actually the 4-year anniversary. So talk about, more, alignment with this interview happening is that about 4 years ago, my gut got punched pretty hard by the universe. And I realized that my 15-year marriage had come to an end. I had always listened to my intuition, but for some reason I lost track of it and I lost connection to it. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had really lost myself in my marriage. And that day that I discovered that my marriage was over, that my now ex-husband was having an affair, I also knew at the same time that I had to do some work on myself, because I knew that I had to take responsibility for how I showed up in my marriage. And that was a big, hard step for me to have to do, but I didn't know how. And I was in therapy and I was reading books and I was listening to podcasts and you name it, I was reading or listening to it. And one day I saw a Facebook post from a friend of mine who had become a life coach, and I wasn't really sure what that was. So I reached out. And after our conversation, I realized that the power of coaching laid in visioning for your future. And that was something that I was unable to wrap my mind around, and knew I needed support in that because, again, the foundation of my entire life had been ripped out from underneath me, and I needed support in that area. So I not only hired a life coach, but I also enrolled in the program because I wanted to be able to do the work on myself as well. And so when I came out of the program about a year later, not only was I certified, but I had also moved through all of the emotions around my divorce in under a year. And I knew that there was something really special to what coaching provided that, and don't get me wrong, I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I think that there's so much value in it. And to be honest, it's what enabled me to actually ask for my divorce. And at the same time, I think that there's a power in having both, because with therapy, I was able to really look at how I had brought certain behaviors that I had learned growing up into my marriage. And then with coaching, I was able to really focus on those things so that moving forward, I knew better. I could make different choices, and coaching enabled me to really shift my mindset around not only who I was, but who I wanted to be, what I was willing to tolerate, likes, dislikes, which seems kind of weird, when you're in your 40s and all of a sudden you look in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself. I knew that I needed to get reacquainted with her, given all the experiences that I had been through. So at this point in time, what, I feel so fortunate to stand here and say is that I really got through the program, I got through the recovery process with a team. And my team included a coach, and it included my therapist as well. And I'm lucky enough to now gift that back to the women that I am fortunate enough to work with. So helping them to really rediscover themselves to create that confident life is what I do. And helping them to find their identity and voice and to stand confidently again in that same place is really, I get to be that example for them and to let them know that regardless of where they are, it is possible for them.
Minus the idea that, like you said in the beginning, you needed to take responsibility for your part in there. Take a step back from the dynamic between the two of you. And what were the things do you think were prevalent for you leading up to, even getting into, because most of us repeat core wounds that we had because we didn't fix it before we got into the marriage to begin with. The marriage is the place where it gets uncovered and we have an opportunity to do something about it most of the time. And a lot of us don't. So then of course, then the marriage ends and we're still stuck with the same wounds we came in with. So what do you think what did you walk into the marriage with that then got shown to you at the tail end?
Sure. So what I walked into the marriage with was not feeling seen or heard my whole life and just blending in and doing what was expected of me. I come from a family, and I first and foremost, super close with my family. I love them dearly. They did the best that they could. But I was also the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. And so they came to this country. My parents were not born here either. So when they came to this country, everything to them was fitting in. And so that also meant both my sister and I fitting into the ideal of what women, right? Little girls are supposed to be. You sit there quietly and you nod your head. And because they so badly wanted to blend in with society and not be immigrants. And so I grew up at times, I was the one who always had the opinion. I was always the one pushing boundaries, but I got silenced because it was unheard of at the time. And so I ended up bringing that dynamic into my marriage, where I learned to silence myself. I learned to have opinions. And interestingly enough, I didn't show up this way in corporate. I worked in corporate America for almost 20 years in ad sales, and I was a manager and a leader. But for some reason in my marriage, I just became this, I only saw my reflection through my husband at the time. And that's very much how I grew up. I grew up basically looking to my parents, my grandparents, on who it was that I was supposed to be, what it was that I was supposed to say. I did what was expected of me. And that's the behavior that I brought into my marriage. So I got to take responsibility for not using my voice and for relying on my husband at the time to provide it to me. I saw when he was happy, I was happy. It didn't matter if I was or not. It was if he's happy, he's happy. Whatever he wanted, we did. And, I lost myself as a wife. I lost myself in the role of mom, but again, through the lens of what I thought was expected of me. And that's probably the biggest piece. The second one I have to say is I also, it's so interesting because I'm still trying to figure out how I learned this, but it is something that I also brought into my marriage, which was because I was not using my voice, I also would have these conversations in my mind, right? We all become really good storytellers. And I never bothered to include my husband at the time in those conversations. So something would happen, and then I would go through this whole story in my mind. And then all of a sudden I would get mad at him and, because he didn't do something, right? As an example. And he'd kind of look at me and be like, but I didn't know. And I'm like, how did you not know? Like, why aren't you reading my mind? And so that opened my eyes up to see that I was a really poor communicator. And so I had to take responsibility for the bad communication that I contributed in my marriage. And it also opened me up to see, like, where else in my life am I not being an effective communicator? So those were the two big eye-opening pieces that I had to face. And don't get me wrong, it was not easy, and I didn't like it, and it was very uncomfortable. And at the same time, I knew that I couldn't move forward until I confronted it.
Did you have any indication throughout the marriage that there was a problem or an imbalance, or was it only when you said it happened and then you're like, uh-oh, and now I'm forced to sort of be cracked open to become conscious and look at it?
Yeah, so we had been in couples therapy for a couple of years. We knew that we had communication issues. He was also struggling with some things in his own life that, out of privacy reasons, I don't want to go into too much detail, but my ex-husband at the time, he was definitely struggling. And I think that in my gut, I knew back then that things were bad. I knew that he was struggling. I also knew that I was unhappy. And I was the person, right, who I don't fail at anything. So I was going to fight tooth and nail for my marriage. And I was willing to put in the work. I was willing to be miserable. I was miserable. I was miserable because I started realizing how much of myself I had lost. I was miserable because I was really tired of being in corporate. I didn't want to do my job anymore, but we had gotten to a place in our life where we both created a life where we depended on our paychecks. And, me taking a pay cut at the time was not an option. And I just felt stuck and powerless. So that's where my own misery came from. Looking back, it's funny, hindsight definitely is 2020. And there definitely were signs that I chose to not pay attention to because we were that couple, right? I call it the Facebook facade. We were the perfect couple. We had the perfect family pictures. He was the last man to ever cheat on his wife. It's funny because when a lot of people eventually found out that there was infidelity, they didn't assume it was him. And that's not to say that that's who I was, but that's how shocked everybody was at what had happened. And so it was an eye-opening experience, but one that, I was in complete denial over my own emotions, again, because I didn't have the toolkit necessary to really do something about it.
Well, in terms of law of attraction, I mean, you're starting at a place of, with a core wound of not being seen or heard, or, not, wanting to fit in, blend in, so to speak, not have a voice. You were starting at a place where, you're kind of only going to go up at this point, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the story can only really get better about empowerment, because in a place of fitting in everywhere, that's disempowering in itself. The idea that we're supposed to blend in, the idea that we're supposed to be like other people and not honor who we really are. So I think that, in terms of your consciousness and awakening and path there, all of us have a different path to get there. And I think telling your story obviously is going to help empower other people as well, even just to hear if they're in the midst of their unfolding in a similar way to what you have gone through. One of the things that I love, because I know in my current relationship, Doug's had a couple divorces, and his last one really was the one that catapulted him into consciousness. He was really awake. And I remember looking at pictures of him prior to all of this happening and thinking to myself, it's not that we have missed each other or we could have gotten together sooner in life. We wouldn't have been a match because we weren't ready, because he wasn't at that place. And so timing really is everything. Yes. And so speak to the whole, the divorce rehab process. So when you're working with women, when you went through your own transformation, you've now created a process around that. What does that look like?
Sure. Yeah. And the process itself is it's a hybrid of the coaching methodology that I studied and got certified under, along with my own personal experience. One of the things, as we're all kind of creating our own programs, right, is what makes us different, what makes us unique, and what really was a differentiator in my own recovery that I know is special to me, is also something that doesn't really exist in the marketplace. And that is, my program is designed to provide women with accountability and what I call tough loving. I am not interested in being anyone's best friend, because best friends keep us stuck. And the only way through the emotions and the pain of divorce is to really feel through to get to the other side. And a lot of times that's a bold coach to guide you through that process and to be your biggest cheerleader, by holding your hand and walking you through. And so those qualities are what make my program so unique and so different. And rehab is actually an acronym. So, I have a marketing background, so of course, I've got to have my acronym. But the R stands for really rediscovering your identity and voice. And I have a process through which I walk my clients through that. The E is all about ending your pity party and your victim mentality, because that is what keeps us stuck. The H is about healing your wounds. And to do that, you get to mourn all of the aspects of your marriage and your life that have come to an end, right? It's not just the marriage ending. It's the dreams you had, the life, the financial income, the best friend that you more times than not lost, etc. And we don't really admit that there's more than just the marriage that we're having to deal with emotions around. The A is about really finding acceptance, right? Finding acceptance in where you're at, who you are, and what you've learned through this process. And then the B is about building a new foundation from which your best life gets to be created from. And that's where the self-confidence comes into play.
Love that. That's easy for people to remember. So you say that there are 3 crucial steps that people miss in their healing process. What are those?
Yeah, they may not sound so surprising, but they are not what people think about, and you've been through divorce, so you're familiar, you've been through this, like you know what it feels like. And unless you're actually going through the process or this has happened to you, you can't really understand. But the first mistake that people make is what I call lone wolfing and like retreating, right? So people don't ask for help because they think that they're embarrassed, they're ashamed. So that's why we all tend to listen to podcasts, we buy books, we passively join Facebook groups, and we listen to other people's stories who sound worse than ours. So we think we shouldn't be, sad, or, other people have it worse than we do. So number one is ask for help. It's like, if you're sick, do you go to the doctor or do you Google it yourself, right? It's like any other emotional or trauma that you go through. You need to have a team, right? Not only in divorce, do you need a mediator and or a lawyer and or a financial planner. You need a coach, you need a therapist, a counselor, whatever it is that will help you to not do this by yourself, because it's actually the worst thing that you can do is to try to do it yourself. And so many women come to me where they're like, oh, I've been trying to do it by myself. And, and so it's mistake number one. Mistake number two is we tend to push away whatever emotions are really surfacing, right? So, you may wake up one morning and realize like you're having a hard time getting out of bed, and you start crying. And then all of a sudden you get mad at yourself, you start judging yourself, and you just cut off the emotion. And what ends up happening is that you are essentially compressing the emotions that you're feeling one on top of the other. And what happens is, and the way that I describe it is, and I did this, is what ends up happening is you literally erupt like a volcano. And it's usually you have an outburst, and 9 times out of 10, it's an outburst with somebody that you love, that you care about. And a lot of times, and I hear this with my clients, and listen, I'm guilty of it too, where I've just overreacted to my kids because I've compressed all of this emotion, and then all of a sudden it just gets unleashed out of nowhere. So really allowing yourself to feel through what is coming up and not judging yourself, and just letting it be what it is. I have some techniques that I use with my private clients to be able to help them, through that process even more, because a lot of times the reason that we ignore it or we judge ourselves is because we don't think we're going to come out of it, and we're afraid to let ourselves go there. So it's the fear of, what you might actually feel by sinking into the emotions. And then the third thing is, the other mistake is a lot of my clients, and just in general, we tend to not set boundaries for ourselves when we're going through divorce, because especially as women, we want to keep the family together. We don't want to, say no. We tend to be people pleasers. And what people don't understand, and what I educate my clients on, is setting boundaries is actually a crucial step in the divorce process, because it allows you to set limits. It allows you to set rules that define where you end and somebody else begins. And they're really intended to ensure the best communication and the best relationships moving forward. We think that setting boundaries actually pushes people away. And, so we tend to just, we try to kind of pull away from doing that. We don't want to hurt anybody. We don't want to rock the boat, or perhaps we're in the middle of our divorce and we're afraid that we're going to get penalized by our ex if we try to set a boundary. But what boundaries really enable us to do is to really allow us to, it's really about, the example I give is this. I'm going to use a metaphor to describe this. Is, when you have and live in a home or an apartment or wherever it is that you are, and you put out like a no trespassing sign, right? The no trespassing sign is meant to keep people out that you don't want coming into your personal space. And with boundaries, it's very much the same way. It's not that they're firm and, rooted in the ground and can't be moved. By all means, they can definitely be flexible. but they're there to be able to protect you and give you control over who you let come onto your property, for example. One example that I give a lot that I set as a boundary was, I'm also very spiritual and have been since my divorce. And I'm also, it's a big piece of my belief system now. And when my ex-husband and I separated, I set a boundary with him that I didn't want him driving onto my driveway when he either picked up or dropped off the boys. And at first he was like, I don't understand. And I said, I know you don't understand, but this is what I need in order for us to have a relationship and for me to feel comfortable with you entering my space. And I physically could feel him energetically when he would come onto my property versus if he just, pulled alongside the curb. That has since shifted and that's not an issue anymore. But in the beginning, that's something I really needed. Another example is, I had to stop texting him and talking on the phone, and we only communicated via email because I felt obligated to respond immediately. And that's exactly what I did. I would react and it would be emotional versus via email. I knew that I could take a breath and take some time. So it's those types of boundaries that are crucial that people make mistakes because they're operating from a place of fear.
Well, I think boundaries are important for everyone, period, all the time.
Yes.
And but in times like these, it's when people get pushed, and women especially, that we have to come up with them and create them. And
Yes.
if we understood what our needs were and how we respond to things, we could practice lovingly setting them all over the place. Even just boundaries and schedules. For me, I have a very, very strong scheduling boundary. And especially now, since my business has been shifting and changing, and I've really been able to take back my mornings, which has been amazing for me. And it's really amplified my ability to receive and the kinds of people that I want to be working with. But before, I was stuck in a little bit of scarcity of working with people that I've been working with for years and years and years. And not that I hated it by any means, but it was something that kept me sort of in a pattern of a little bit of resentment. Wasn't the best for me. On the days that I could take the time, I would, but it put me, I knew what it did for my soul. I knew what it did for I know that for me to sleep in a couple days a week with no alarm creates freedom. I'm grounded. I'm clear-headed. I'm more positive. I feel it's really just the highest level of freedom for me. And from there, I can then enjoy the rest of my day. Today, Doug and I went to the beach. It's Monday on this recording. And on Mondays and Wednesdays, we have a practice that we do. And originally, the practice was supposed to be a no-tech morning. And somewhere in there, he grabbed his phone, and then I grabbed my iPad, and then it kind of it didn't really happen anymore. And then last week he's like, I have this sense of urgency that I don't know where it comes from. And I said, well, really we're supposed to be doing a no tech Monday and Wednesday practice. And he's like, okay, let's go back to that. And so now we've recommitted, and it's a huge shift. And so it's just an example of a boundary that happens in our daily lives for us to take into consideration. But when we get put under pressure in a divorce or in a marriage and you have kids, all of a sudden it's like, oh, do I want to fight about it? Oh, is this going to bring up, a defensive response in my partner? So how did you go about forming the sentences? There's the without being defensive and argumentative. How could you say, this is what I need, and not make it about them or blame them?
Sure. So, I think it's that simple, right? And like you've said too, I just want to also highlight, boundaries are really important with everyone in your life, and kids included. That was something that was also a really big struggle for me, was setting boundaries with every human being in my life and figuring out the language around what that is supposed to be. So with boundaries, I think that in terms of the language, right, in how it is that you communicate, I think it's really just a matter of being clear and being gracious and respectful of the other person, right? It's not intended to be hurtful or mean, but it's meant to, you have to have a certain amount of respect for the other person, regardless of whatever it is that they did. You have to be kind and respectful when you're communicating the things that you want. Otherwise, they won't hear you. And I think that that's a big reason why we're so afraid to set them, is because we're so afraid of rejection, abandonment, confrontation, right? Women, guilt, like I have a ton of guilt. And I think that when we're able to just be really thoughtful, calm, respectful, and using as few words as possible, right? And also trying to not justify the boundary, right? Because then you're getting defensive and then you make the other person defensive. And I don't know if we're headed in this direction or not, but what it enables you to be able to do ultimately is to firmly and politely state what it is, so that if they are breaking that boundary, there are consequences. And I don't mean that in a way of, you're trying to hurt somebody, but if boundaries are not being respected, that means that you are not taking care of yourself and you're not being respected. Boundaries are the key to self-respect. So it's really important that you also, if you want someone to respect you, you have to respect them when you're communicating it to them.
I would agree that it's important for us, out of self-respect, to create the boundaries. I know for me and for my ex, or even for Doug and I, in terms of, understanding people's boundaries, I think that the deeper we can dive into why you have the boundary, not that you have to, because, just asking for what it is that you need, but sometimes not everyone has the same love language. Not everybody understands. And it's just it could just be a simple conversation of words or space or quality time or right. I know for Doug and I that when we get into an argument of any kind, if it's explained in a certain way, all of a sudden that there's a quick understanding, and now I can follow that. I understand that, because it's not, we operate differently. Obviously everybody operates differently to a certain degree, especially when you don't share a love language or even astrologically. I want to ask you, because I didn't in the beginning, just out of curiosity, do you know your astrological profile?
I mean, I'm a Leo. I don't know aside from that.
Okay.
So more than that.
Just a Leo. Okay, great. Well, a Leo who doesn't have a voice. Yeah, well, that's not good.
No,
that's definitely not good. And what about our firstborn, only child, middle child?
No, I'm the youngest of two. Yeah, two girls. Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back to the first of the three crucial steps that people miss in their healing process, and that one being the lone wolf and not reaching out. So of course, a lot of people don't reach out because they have shame. So let's address how you get them out of the shame cave, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the first, there's an exercise that I do with my clients around, so many times it's really about paying attention to the language that you're using, right? And so many times it's, I'm a failure, I'm unlovable, I screwed up, I did this, I did that, versus my marriage failed, right? Or, it's that you are lovable, it's just that this love, outgrew itself. And I think that what people don't, I think that the shame and the embarrassment comes from how we talk to ourselves. And this is where educating my clients on what I call, it's not what I call, but mindfulness, right? A mindfulness practice is really crucial. And mindfulness, in case those of your listeners who are tuning in don't know what that means, it's really about paying attention to your thoughts and your feelings, but having no judgment around them, just letting them be. And so part of releasing the shame and embarrassment is about looking at our thoughts and our feelings as neutral instead of putting a polarity on it, right? So instead of, by saying I'm a failure, that's negativity, right? Versus my marriage failed, and that's just a neutral statement. And as society as a whole, I think we've been taught how to put positive and negative spins on things, right? You win, you lose, better, worse, positive, negative. And really at the end of the day, it's about learning to see where you're at, learning to see your emotions, actions as neutral versus, a polarity. And that's where the victim party, the victim mindset and the pity party comes into play. And that's something that I really encourage people to do, is just to get curious about your feelings, but do so from a perspective of they're just feelings. It doesn't make you a bad person. You're not a bad person. And I remember I was terrified. I mean, I was so embarrassed. That's why I lone wolfed for a little while. It's why I waited 2 weeks until I told my parents that I was separated, because I was terrified, because I don't, Wendy doesn't get divorced. Wendy doesn't, quote unquote, look like someone who gets divorced, right? I had all these thoughts and perceptions around what I thought this meant. And it's because of the polarity that I chose to put on it. And to be honest, it's one of the big reasons why I am so passionate about what I do, is because I am, it makes me hurt, physically makes me hurt when I hear people feel so shameful and embarrassed about their situation, or about saying that they're separated or divorced, because society tends to look at it negatively versus, marriage. It's like this happy-go-lucky. Well, a lot of us who get divorced are actually a lot happier, and it was our choice. And we don't even get that, that sense of, possibility that there could be something happier on the other side. Instead, I feel like society plays a really big role in why it is that we all feel so embarrassed and ashamed.
I'd agree. And I know for you, you've mentioned that your marriage feels neutral to you. That does not feel neutral to me. So just as
that's fine.
I know to a lot of my listeners too, because there's a reason for everything, and some of it's unseen or not seen, right? And there's lessons and all of it for us, and it's really just an evolution and expansion for a lot of the people that are listening, because most of my listeners are somehow involved in law of attraction. So talk about what you said you have become more spiritual since your divorce. What is your practice?
So my spiritual practice is, I believe in the power of the universe. I believe that things happen for us, not to us. I believe in guardian angels. I have, I read Gabby Bernstein's Universe Has Your Back book, and it was a really powerful read for me, because part of the book is about declaring a sign to the universe for you to see your sign when you know you're on your path. And even if you don't know that you're on your path because you don't see your sign, you're still on it. That has been really powerful. I see my sign when I need it, and when I know that I'm on my path, and I don't see it when I know I'm still on the course. So that's number one. Number two is I've seen great results from working with theta healers. And so much so that I went and got myself certified. So I am also a theta healing practitioner, and I bring theta healing into my own practice, both with myself, and then I also use it on my clients. So the power in connecting with Creator, and witnessing healings, witnessing belief shifts. Soul fragments are a big piece of divorce, where I do believe I always felt energetically connected with my ex-husband. I knew that we were connected in past lives. I felt it. I could feel him. And I believe that when you're in a long-term relationship, whether, you're married, with a piece of paper or not, you do exchange soul fragments, and they need and get to be re-exchanged, and sort of cleaned as they get returned to one another. And so I do a lot of work with my clients on that, to really also energetically heal my clients, because it's not just here in this physical world. I believe that there's a spiritual realm that we also get to heal in the recovery process.
Beautiful. Great. So now I know you have a program. Obviously it's called Divorce Rehab, right?
Yes.
And is it a program online? Is it just coaching? Like it's all one-on-one delivered, or do you any kind of group coaching?
Yeah. So there's two different programs. So there's one-on-one private coaching with me, where that is all done. I do all my client work on the phone, Zoom. I have clients all over the country. And the one-on-one is where you really get that private attention. We customize your plan it's a 6-month program. So we customize what your plan is going to look like together. Everybody's is different. I don't have a custom cookie cutter plan. I design everything with my private clients up front, and we work together through that process. They have access to me privately between sessions because, again, accountability is a really big piece. So that's number one. And number two is I actually am launching, ironically, today, a group program. So my group program is really intended to reach more women who are looking for support, but in a group format. So I've essentially taken my toolkit that I use with my private clients, and I'm opening that up for a group coaching environment. So that's weekly Zoom calls where you sign up for what I call, hot seat coaching, and you get really laser coaching every single week. You get homework as it relates to my toolkit. There's accountability through a Facebook group that my team and I support. And so there's two different ways. It just really depends on where it is that you're at, the level of support that you want and need with that. And that's something that I work with everyone to determine which is the best fit for them, given where they're at.
And I know you offer a 15-minute divorce recovery call. That's a free call for people.
Yes, I do.
And they can just come to the website to wendysterling.net to sign up for that?
They can, yeah. And I also have, I actually created a unique URL just to make it that much easier. It goes straight to my calendar link, which is schedulewithwendy.com. And I offer a free 15 minutes because, we all deserve to be heard. And if people are also interested in learning more about my program or any of the groups that I do, I have a private Facebook group as well that's free that I'm contributing content into every day. Whatever support it is that they need, I'm here to lend my ear. And I also have a very extensive network. So depending upon where it is that you're at, what support you need, I've referred out to mediators, lawyers, financial experts, therapists, other coaches. So just depending upon what it is that you need, I am here to serve anybody listening.
Great. So that is schedulewithwendy.com. I will put that in the show notes along with her website, which is wendysterling.net. And so any parting words for people that are, because again, today's show was mostly about dealing with divorce and what happens after divorce and what we need to focus on. But, all of you that are in a relationship and, in terms of maybe you don't want to get to divorce and you're not, and I've given you other tools on that too, right? If there was an overarching theme for all women or couples or people in relationship that you think you've learned, that you teach, that you try to focus on, what do you think would be two things that people really want to focus on to support improving their current relationship or making sure that they're getting ready for the next one?
Sure. I think that doing the work is really important. I think that the divorce rate for second marriages is so high because people don't do the work. They just jump right into the next relationship. I think that it's really important that people recognize that doing the work, taking the time, really reconnecting with themselves, because every relationship impacts you in ways that, sometimes you don't realize until a couple of months later, and until you are really able to start recognizing the reflection that you see in the mirror, or even, just loving yourself again, right? Just like knowing who you are, knowing what you want. One of the things that I think we lose sight of is, it's really hard to love somebody else when we don't love ourselves. And, that was something I didn't realize I didn't love myself. I thought I did. And I knew that I didn't. And I knew that I needed to get reacquainted with who I was, how this experience impacted me, the lessons that it was teaching me, to really start finding myself. And also, I think confidence plays a really big role too. I was really confident at work, or at least I thought I was, and I wasn't so much so as a person. I got to be, open with myself about what I liked, what I didn't like, what I want to bring forward, what I don't ever want to bring forward into another relationship again. And it was a really powerful experience for me to really be able to have that self-awareness, and to trust that I am enough. And I also think, the other piece too, is that so many people say all the time, like, I hate being alone. I don't want to be alone. And I say that alone is a choice. That is totally up to you. You don't have to be alone. There are so many different groups out there. I also say that, there's, especially now in COVID, like there's so many different Zoom opportunities for you to connect, to create community. You can always go take a walk in your neighborhood, and there's, yes, I know people are distanced, but how many times do you go outside and I go walk my dog and I see a neighbor and I say hello, or I go to the market and, I engage in a conversation with the person at the checkout counter, perhaps. Like, there's different ways for you to still feel human connection, and alone is a choice. And it's one that I think people need, or not need, but that people really get to stay more present to, that's a choice that they have. And there's a lot of different options out there.
Great. For those of you that can handle that in a healthy way, I will say that if we have a desire and a need, like a too much of a need, I feel like again, back to the point of, and it is my original brand of Fit to Love, if you don't like spending time with you, why would anybody else? There are a lot of lessons to be learned in learning how to be with yourself in a way that's meaningful, in a way that you appreciate, and not feeling so like, remove that story again, get out of the victim mentality of that you're alone, and putting your attention on that either you're alone or lonely. If the relationship with yourself is rich, deep, and peaceful and centered and compassionate, then, I mean, gosh, I value my alone time. Doug's thinking about going away again for the weekend. It's been a long, long time. I went from having a husband that was never home during the day because he worked outside the house to never having a minute alone. And I'm not complaining. I'm in an amazing relationship, but I do really value, now that I don't have it anymore, my alone time. So I would invite all of you to use that as a great way to reconnect with yourself. So, but for those of you that struggle, I definitely appreciate all of the resources that you just mentioned, because until we're able to take that on, sometimes we do need to walk before we run and use the training wheels on the bike before we let those go. So everyone check out wendysterling.net. Go to the show notes also, and you can do schedulewithwendy.com if you want to jump on a 15-minute divorce recovery call with her to see if what she can do for you, either a coaching program or the group program or just resources if she's not the right fit. But definitely reach out to her if you have questions, if you felt like today's show has touched you in ways that you would like to learn more about. I know women definitely need to have more of a voice. And I know it's probably why a lot of you listen to me. Because, that's the attraction there of like, oh, I want to be able to do that. And, if I can do it, you can do it. If Wendy can do it, you can do it. There's no reason why you can't do it. And we're here to help you. So check Wendy out. Wendy, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate the work that you do and for helping to get people the support that they need. Thank you so much, JJ.